Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. Lots of news today. For starters, Krysten Sinema, who is now an independent from the great state of Arizona, has decided she will not run for re-election to the Senate. Good news for Democrats. That means Rubin, who is an excellent candidate, will have a clear field and will be going up against Kari Lake, who is a crackpot, if you recall, from 2022, and certainly a MAGA loon. So, what other news do we have? The Supreme Court this week, as we expected, decided that they would not knock Donald Trump off the ballot. But the way in which they did it and the internal politics of the court were fascinating. All they had to do was make a technical decision that the states cannot use Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to knock a candidate off the ballot. That makes sense, after all, because you don't want one state deciding one way and another state deciding another. But they went even further. They said you have to have Congress act before you can knock someone off the ballot. That wasn't necessary, and it got the dander up of three of the more progressive justices who pointed out this was totally unnecessary, and they seemed to be coddling, as they put it, insurrectionists, meaning Donald Trump. Why should Congress have to act? It doesn't have to act for other portions of the 14th Amendment. This seemed to be their way of completely satisfying, diffusing the anger of the MAGA crazies who would storm the Supreme Court if they actually applied the letter of the 14th Amendment. So it was pretty blatant. It was good that the three justices called them out for it. And what's even more interesting is Justice Amy Coney Barrett, no liberal she, kind of weighed in to say, I don't think the majority should have gone that far, but gosh, let's not shriek about it, meaning her more progressive colleagues. It was a weird thing to do and really gratuitous. She could have either joined in the concurrence or kept her mouth shut. But I think it's a good thing, actually. I think she's showing some independence, some level of discomfort with what the majority, in this case, really 5 justices, were up to. And perhaps that's a bit of a positive sign for the really where it's all going to be, all the action's going to be focused. And that is on, of course, the immunity case, which the justices have decided to hear and will be hearing on April 22nd. So we'll keep our eyes peeled. Meanwhile, I want to point out that it is all not grim in the federal courts. There was an 11th Circuit ruling today concerning a anti-woke law that DeSantis, you remember him from his doomed presidential campaign, got through the Florida legislature, which essentially says private companies couldn't have mandatory meetings to discuss inclusion and equality and equity. Well, even the 11th Circuit, which is one of the most right-wing circuits we have, said this is the original sin, they use that phrase, the original sin of the First Amendment, which is discriminating basic on the content of the speech. It was quite the rebuke, not only to DeSantis, but to the whole movement of trying to weed out, suppress, ban books, ban speech, essentially eliminate any discussion that we have been and remain to be, to a large extent, a racist society. So score one for the First Amendment, and maybe even score one for the federal courts, which are not completely in Donald Trump's thrall. I do want to point out what was probably the most telling and the worst article I have seen from the New York Times in a long time. That's saying a lot. And I'm not referring to their poll, which once again shows within the margin of error Trump leading. And if you look in the tabs, makes no sense whatsoever, because it would assume that Biden is trailing among women. I don't think so. Would also assume that the electorate is going to be Republican in leaning, which hasn't happened in decades. But put that to the side. I want to call attention to another piece they wrote, which was entitled something like Biden superfans who think the rest of us are crazy. I'm paraphrasing. Apparently, they don't know anyone who really likes Joe Biden. So they went out into the countryside like Margaret Mead tramping around in the jungle to find these strange eggs, these people who think Biden is doing a good job. Doesn't that tell you something about their bias, about their lack of perspective? There are millions and millions of people who think Joe Biden is a very good president. And a lot of them, by the way, are women of color, men of color too. Don't they know any of these people? Are all of them cynical urbanites, white like themselves? It was an astounding, revealing article, not of the people they were interviewing, but of their own perspective. That I can't imagine a world in which people are informed, look at what Biden has accomplished, and think, that's a good thing. He's been an excellent president. That's their mindset. Well, we are not going to get a fair shake from the mainstream media, I will tell you. But I will also say that we get, I think, and even I do, get too caught up in the ridiculous polls and the ridiculous framing. This election is not going to be determined by the polls. It's not going to be determined by the New York Times. It's going to be determined by Biden getting out there, repeating over and over and over again the simple message: he's been a good president. The other guy is crazy and is leading us down the garden path to tyranny. That's it. That's the message. Good president versus crazy, dangerous guy. And oh, by the way, with Trump spending a lot of time in courtrooms this summer and fall, most likely, Biden needs to make this point crystal clear. Trump is running so he doesn't have to be held accountable for crimes. That's what this is all about. He said it. He's going to get into office and either pardon himself or instruct the Justice Department to drop the federal cases. He'll insist that the state cases be held in abeyance, and he will escape responsibility for committing crimes because he can get himself elected. That's the end of American democracy. If people can do that, then we don't have an equal system of justice. We don't have a president who is responsible for upholding the law. We have complete lawlessness, and we have really lost our way. And Biden shouldn't be shy about making that point. I know he doesn't want to talk about the substance of those cases. He doesn't want to give Trump grounds for appeal later on. But there's nothing wrong with saying this campaign that he is running is an effort to escape the long arm of the law. And that's something we can't allow. So a lot to keep in mind. We'll have more news, I am sure, as the week goes on. Remember, there's the State of the Union. And if you check my Thursday column at the Washington Post, I'll have some good suggestions for Joe Biden. So if you like this program, you like our other programs, please tell your friends. They can subscribe, they can follow at YouTube, at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.